ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us for our keynote address. We've gathered here today to talk business of libraries, and now we are together to be inspired by the world around us. And there's nobody that I would rather have come and talk to us about what's going on in the world than Chris Kutarna. So I'm going to hand it over to him, and I'm just going to do the maintenance of making sure people are able to get in, and everything else is him. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, everyone. I'm really grateful to be a part of your gathering, and yeah, if in some simple, humble way I can just help to spark some of your own genius, then I'll feel privileged to have had an opportunity to do that. I have such just great admiration for you, for the institutions that you are the custodians of. So it's a real privilege to spend some time with you here today. And if it's all right with you, I'm just going to roll into it and throw up some slides. And I thought, since so many of us are book lovers, if it's all right with you, I wanted to begin with a bit of a personal reflection, because it was about 7 years ago that I published my first book, this one, Age of Discovery. It was March 2016. And, I got to tell you, these past 7 years, looking at events through a historical lens, through a Renaissance lens, has proven really helpful for making sense of shock, political shocks, technological shocks, pandemic shocks. And I've also found it a really helpful lens for understanding what this strange time that we're living in is asking of us, is asking of you. Because this can so easily be an age of chaos, of crisis, of conflict, of confusion, anxiety, but it can also be an age of discovery. And I really do believe that which of those it is up to all of us, and it's up to you. It comes down to whether you recognize, prioritize, and embark on your own journeys of discovery, or reject them. That is going to make all of the difference for the rest of us in terms of the spirit of the time that we are living in. So we all need to explore more. That's the deep conclusion that I've reached over these past 7 years. And I'm going to throw out at you two what I think are really good reasons. I hope that there are two reasons that will help you to reach that same conclusion for yourself. But I also feel like there's a third reason that I'm guessing is already inside you. And it is that feeling that we can't possibly keep doing things the way we've been doing them, or we can't stay here, or we can't stay on this path that we are on. It is that feeling of literally being unsettled that is urging us to explore more. So, I'm gonna talk about a lot of big things that are happening out there, and I hope you find it all very interesting. But really, the deeper purpose behind all of my words is all I'm asking you to do is just to pay a little bit more attention to this part of yourself, to that spirit of exploration that is already there. And speaking of another book, in 2004, Thomas Friedman published The World is Flat. I'll bet that you've got many copies of this book in your library system. And, it was an instant bestseller, if you recall. And why? Because right there in the title, Thomas, he put his finger on how the world had changed due to the internet and globalization, the opening up of China. and therefore how we needed to change, how we needed to shift our expectations of opportunity and risk, how to help us make sense of the world. And I found that was such a helpful metaphor in 2004. But now we're in 2023, and we are grappling with a whole new set of changes. And so we need a new metaphor to make sense of it. And I think let's start there. Let's give ourselves that. And to help us arrive at that, I want us to draw a picture of the biggest changes underway today. And here's where I found that it really helps to step back and get some historical perspective. Because once we step away from all of the noise and all of the glitter, I think it's easier to see some deeper realities about how civilization works. And one of the things that I've noticed is that pretty much any civilization in history, it must perform 5 fundamental tasks and is in many ways defined by how it performs these tasks, which are to generate energy, grow food, communicate information, transform materials, and transport stuff with available technology. And so for the earliest human societies, this meant things like muscle power and hunting and gathering, speech and memory, shaping trees and rocks, and a lot of walking. The scale at which a society can do these functions doesn't determine, but it informs a lot about the scale of that society. Now, no one can get all of this stuff done themselves, so we also need some kind of box, an organizing system that holds us together. And this is the political, the legal, economic, and other institutions that tell us who leads whom and who gets what, the surplus that this collaborative effort generates. And different societies in history have built different boxes for themselves. So, for example, ancient Egypt, its box was really built around a pharaoh, a god king. It was a society with very few rulers and lots of subjects and slaves. And that seemed to work for them, in part because, this was a society that lived mainly along a single river. And the secret to success was getting everyone to play their part in the same annual drama of the flood, the planting, the harvest, the flood, the planting, the harvest. Compare that to the ancient Roman Empire, which replaced Egypt as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Many ecologies, economies, many cultures, and so they built into their OS concepts like citizenship and elections and the legal status of persons, because they needed to recruit a much bigger management class to manage the complexity of that empire. And that's also a good historical example of how, if we flip any one of the pieces of this picture, it has consequences across society. And if we flip them all, then we are in a new world, full stop. I've often said that if we want to tell the shortest story of the last 500 years of technological change, if I only had an elevator ride to do it, I would draw this picture. And I'd talk about the major shifts in the last 500 years. Gutenberg's press, which flipped society's supply of information from scarcity to abundance. The steam engine, fossil fuels, it broke society free from the limits of human and animal power and enabled us to harness mechanical horsepower. The internal combustion engine, it shrank the world by a scale of 100 in terms of how long it took to get anything anywhere. We had a green revolution. We figured out how to harness chemistry to amplify our crop production. We had these new materials like steel and aluminum that made whole new cities and whole new industries possible. And then, of course, computers that help every human brain to go further faster. That's the short story of what is different, at least technologically, from 500 years ago to today. Okay, so why this history lesson? What does this history help us to see about our present? Well, I think, if we look out at the world we're living in now, in this picture, what really becomes clear is we are bringing forth all of these new technologies, powerful technologies to play with, AI, blockchain, bioengineering. And they are inviting us to rethink every fundamental pillar of how society works. So, for example, will we flip from limited fossil fuels to unlimited renewable energy? Will we flip where we get our protein from breaking macroorganisms down to building microorganisms up? And just think of the consequences that would have for the ways of life. Are we going to do something similar for other materials and just design for ourselves whatever we can't find in nature, like we've begun to do? Are we going to build vehicles that can do the transportation for us? And it looks like the answer to that is going to be yes. And maybe the biggest flip that everyone is talking about right now is, are we going to be able to make machines that are more intelligent than we can ever be?
Was going on very well. And then very suddenly, I realized recently that maybe the digital intelligences we were building on computers were actually learning better than the brain. And that sort of changed my mind after about 50 years.
Every one of these flips that we're trying to create is going to have horizontal consequences across this picture, right? So, the way that we produce protein now, it consumes 40% of the continental US landmass. And I'm sure it's a similar percentage in provinces like Alberta, my home province of Saskatchewan. The way we do transportation today, it uses up 500 billion hours of our time each year, making tiny angular decisions with the steering wheel. So you look at this picture, you look at what we're doing. Is it any wonder that so many people feel unsettled today? I mean, we are basically trying to duplicate the last 500 years of technological transformation in the next 50, which is a pace and a scale that the humanity has never experienced before. And that is only the changes that we are trying to engineer on our society. This box is an engine, and like an engine, it needs an uninterrupted supply of resources to run. This engine needs human resources, which are drawn from people, and it needs natural resources, which are drawn from nature. And a century ago, there were about 1.6 billion of us, and we mostly took these spheres for granted. Today, we are 8 billion, and it's quite clear that we cannot do that. So, we can't ignore how burning fossil fuels does have an impact on the biosphere, on climate, which can disrupt our food systems. And if it does, then for the people who can't adapt to that disruption, then they must migrate to somewhere else, which, has all these political and social consequences for the places where they go, right? That is the system, the interconnected world that we're living in now. Just as an aside, by the way, I have a lot of fun playing with this picture. And now that you have it in your head, I hope that you will too, because it really makes it easy to think at a very big scale about new things that happen. So, for example, if next time you're at a party and someone walks up to you and they ask you, so what's the big deal with this ChatGPT stuff? Maybe that says something about the kind of parties that I go to, and I have had a lot of fun, playing with it and just seeing how good is this at doing some thinking for me. But now that you have this picture in your head, you can immediately rattle off at least a half dozen ways that ChatGPT, that generative AI could have a big impact on the way the world works now. For example, you might talk about new chemicals. And are we going to use generative AI to come up with new chemicals? We can take the same algorithms that are being used today to generate images that never existed before. Like this one that I generated for you this morning using OpenAI's image generator. Quite pretty, actually. I like it. Take these same algorithms, tweak them a bit, and we can use them to generate images of molecules, molecular diagrams that have never existed before. Like this one that shows promise as a new battery technology, or this one that shows promise as a new drug. And where else do chemicals get used in society? Everywhere. So this is a very powerful picture. It can help you to understand a lot of what's going on out there, outside of this room, outside of this call. But the key takeaway, the reason I wanted to share it with you on this call, put it this way, right now, everyone else except us is hypnotized with the speed of change right now. But I think what this picture helps us to see is to understand a bit more deeply that it's not just the speed, it is the breadth of change underway that really defines this moment that we're in. The world is wide. That's my metaphor for making sense of the time that we're living in. And we all need to get lateral, much more lateral with it in how we think and how we do. And I'll talk a bit about how towards the end. But for now, I just want you to feel that expanded awareness that the world is wide, and we need to get wider with it. So that's one reason to explore more. A second reason to just trust that spirit of exploration inside you is that the world is new. I'm guessing some people on this call like maps. I love maps. They're one of my favorite things. This is one of my favorites. Some of you may recognize it. This is Ptolemy's map of the world from the 1st century CE. Here's a modern sort of recolorized version. And it's not how we look at the world today. So let me help you out here. This is the Mediterranean Sea. Africa has no southern tip. The Indian Ocean is landlocked. And the Americas, including Alberta, do not exist. No, this was the map of ancient Greece. This was the map of the Bible. It was Europe's best understanding of the world for about 1,500 years. And it was the basic map that Christopher Columbus had in mind when in 1492, he decided to sail west off this page in search of a sea route to the silk and spice riches of Asia, bypassing the middlemen along the old Silk Roads. And to hear Columbus describe it, that is exactly what he did. In fact, Columbus died in 1506, still insisting that he had found his sea route to Asia. It was actually a great disappointment to his investors because he had not found the Asian silks and spices that he had promised them, which made it worthwhile for them to invest in his escapade. And it took about a decade before this man, Amerigo Vespucci, cleared up Europe's confusion. And what he realized is that Columbus hadn't found his sea route to Asia. Actually, he had found something much more important. He had found Europe's ignorance, Europe's blind spot. The reason that there were no Asian silks or spices in these islands was that this was not Asia. This was a mundus novus, a new world to European experience that the ancient Greeks, the Bible had known nothing about. And within 50 years of that realization, Europe's 1,500-year-old understanding of the world was replaced with this one. Still the basic template for most world maps today. I love that story. And the point of it, I think for us, living the time that we're living in now, is that we can look at this world with old eyes and never make sense of it. Or we can make new maps. And for better and worse, the world we live in is going to be defined by those who do the latter. Give you a couple of examples of that. One person who really gets this, who really gets the power of map making today, is this person, Xi Jinping, president of China. And he is on a mission to redefine how the world, especially the global South, sees China, the map they have of China in their head. And from his perspective, he looks at the advanced liberal democracies like Canada and says, you think democracy versus autocracy, you think that that's going to be the contest of the 21st century. But you are trapped in Cold War maps of the past. The contest that I want to wage in the 21st century is between your version of modernity and my vision for modernity, right? This is sort of the propaganda that he's on about. But the big opportunity from a Chinese perspective is, if you add up all of the advanced modern democracies in the world today, their population is about 1.1 billion people, which means that China with 1.4 this century has the opportunity to define what modernity means, what it looks like, what it feels like for the majority of humanity that ever gets to experience it. And the new map that Xi Jinping is trying to draw says that China's version of modernity is going to be different, and it's going to be better in 4 ways. It's going to be more equitable, with a smaller gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's going to be less materialistic. This says, build a spiritual civilization. And basically what he's saying is that, look, at the top of the Western hierarchy of needs is personal freedom, self-actualization. But what we're selling is that at the top of our hierarchy is going to be a mass epiphany, a better way of living together. That's what we're striving for. It's going to be more in harmony with nature, and it's going to be more peaceful. So the story they're telling is that, the modern countries of the world today, they got to where they are through colonialism, through war. But, and this is particularly a message to the global South, those were their crimes of the past. And we're going to demonstrate that it is possible to rise peacefully, that we can build a shared future for humanity together. Now, obviously, that story is omitting some very important pieces, like Taiwan, like Hong Kong, like Tibet, like Xinjiang. But across a lot of the global South, it is having a lot of appeal, a lot of influence. And it really presents an important geopolitical question to the democratic world, which is, are we putting up a better alternative to that vision of modernity? So that's a kind of big geopolitical example of the contest underway to make new maps. And we are going to live in the world that is defined by that contest. Let me also give a more immediate example that is closer to our day-to-day lives. And that is the world of work, the new geography of work. Pre-pandemic, the world of work, especially office work, looks something like this. Where does office work happen? It happens here. The clue is in the name. And then the pandemic came and it busted that assumption. and scenes like this became ordinary. What you and I are doing right now became ordinary. And this point became a line. I don't know how it is for you in your libraries and organizations. Here in London, in Europe, most organizations are struggling now to figure out where do we fit in this new world of work? Do we get everyone back in the office? That's what some people think. Do we get rid of the office? That's what others think. And then most organizations are muddling somewhere here in the middle. I look at this new map of the world of work, and I feel, I don't know, it is such a one-dimensional world to be trying to create. I mean, if I'm a manager and this is my map of the new world of work, I can't help but be trapped in some zero-sum thinking, between having control and losing control, between having culture and losing culture. And I just feel like there has got to be, in 2023, a richer landscape for us to explore. I think the pandemic did teach us an important insight about this dimension of work, which is that, probably to be our most productive, we do need space to work together, and we do need space to work apart. But we are not only economic units of production. There is this whole other dimension of life, as any member of Generation Z will tell you. And to be most alive, to be fully alive, we need space to be social, and we need space to be individuals. And if this is your map of the new world of work, immediately it becomes easier to imagine new possibilities. I'm actually working with a few large companies here in Europe right now on exactly this, exploring the future of work through this landscape. And already it has led us to some really fascinating, some great questions. Questions like, where do we create our sanctuaries for our people? Where do we create our crossroads? How do we make sure that everyone has access to a beach, a metaphorical beach? And my favorite, how do we give people the ability to go on road trips when they want to? In this case, one of the companies I'm working with, they literally did that. They bought a fleet of camper vans and they made them bookable by their employees who want to go and work on personal projects on their own. And if you're interested in the details of that, you can email me afterwards. I'd be happy to tell you more about it. For this conversation, what's important, what I wanted to just underline is how this zero-sum thinking has been blown apart. And now the thinking is, how do we create better synergies of work and life so that people are more productive, feel more fulfilled than was ever possible in that old world of work? And the takeaway from both of these examples is just the power of cartography, of map making at a time like now. We can be map takers or we can be map makers. And whether we are talking about geopolitics or the future of AI or the future of democracy, somehow we've got to get hold of those maps inside our head that are right now telling us where to go and how to get there. And we've just got to tear them up, because the world is new and we are going to need fresh eyes to see it. Okay, so I promised you 2 reasons. And I hope you find that they are good reasons to trust that feeling, that urge to explore more, to give it priority. And if you're feeling that, then I've accomplished my goal, and the only question that's left is how do you do that? Now, we've been talking some pretty heady stuff for half an hour. So I'm not now going to switch into just giving you obvious advice. We all have Chat GPT for that now. So if you'd like some obvious advice, I'm going to refer you to our robot overlords. And I'm sure they'll be able to help you out. Instead, with the time that we have together as thinking, dreaming, creative human beings, I thought I'd like to leave you with two unsettling questions. And I mean unsettling in the best way possible. I hope that these questions stir the genius inside of you. And the first question, I thought I'd offer you as leaders of organizations. So this is a question not so much for you personally as for your team, for your library system, for organizations that you are a part of. What if learning is your strategy? And I'll give you my personal background behind this question. So I teach executive ed at Oxford's Business School. And I used to wrap things up with this picture. I draw this 2x2 for my adult learners. And I'd say, I'll bet like nowadays you spend most of your time over here, right? On the execution side of thinking and doing. So you formulate strategies, and those strategies guide your decision-making, which helps to drive results. But the world is wide, the world is new. And so we got to be spending a lot more time over here on the exploratory side of thinking and doing, where you're asking new questions, which are helping you make guesses and run tests. Most of the time you're over here trying to complete the mission, but we got to be spending more time over here, just beginning new quests, sending the organization on new quests, some of which we hope might ultimately generate insights that might unsettle the very mission of your organization. I can't tell you how many times I've given that exact script. I feel like I've got it memorized now because this has become a very popular picture. I think I've drawn it for, at least a couple of thousand executives and now a few dozen more. But it was only a couple of months ago that I had the time and I went back to some of my former students, who had loved this picture. And so I brought this picture out again and I just asked them, how's it going? How has this helped? And surprise, no one, not one, no one had found more time to spend over here. Because, this may be what the real world demands of us now, Chris. But this is what the business demands of us. And the real world doesn't stand a chance. And that was really humbling to hear, because all of this time, I've drawn this picture so many times. All this time, I had thought that I was drawing the solution. But I've only just recently realized that no. This is the problem. It is precisely because we think of learning that is something that happens over here, outside of the core work of the organization, that we are never going to find the time for it that we know that it needs. And so that's the background to my question. So what if learning is the strategy? And again, I'm working with a couple of organizations to think about what would that even mean? How would that unsettle things for us? And again, if you want some details, just reach out to me afterwards and I'll be happy to share a bit more. But for now, I just want to urge you to really think hard about this one with your teams. What if learning is your strategy? Because given this, chances are that it might also be your best strategy. And then the second unsettling question, so that's for organizations with their management hats on. Now I want to take those hats off and end how I began with a personal reflection. But this one I offer for you. what if your own journey of discovery is necessary? Not nice to have, but necessary for all of us as a society to move forward. And what if that were true for everyone who walks into a library or uses your services? And here's my context for that question. So the way I see it, humanity's fundamental challenge right now is this: complexity is growing faster than our ability to make sense of it. And so this cognitive gap is growing. And that's why, despite all of our data, despite all of our knowledge, we still manage to miss big things like a global pandemic coming. We say that we are connected, and we are, especially technologically, but we're also not. What we each pay attention to is strongly siloed. It's being made more so by the algorithms and by our politics. And so this might be the situation that we are all in, but this is the problem that I see, and this is the problem that you see. And so society needs more conveners, a lot more people who can bring people together across these silos. And this is where your journey of discovery comes in. In my experience, I've been working this problem for the last 7 years. Most people never bring forth their power to convene. Because, on a topic like, how is AI going to transform the future of libraries as a way of accessing information? People think, well, there's so much to know on that topic, and I only know this much, and somebody surely knows more. And so if anybody's going to pull people together, it's going to be that somebody. And maybe this is the right way to think about it for things that are known. But the impact of AI on libraries and how we use them, collectively, society does not know the answer to that question. Now, as I say, I've been working this problem, this picture, for the past 7 years, and experimenting with it. And I have learned a beautiful truth. I find it beautiful. In my experience, what has the most power to pull people together across these silos, to go on journeys of discovery together? It is not knowledge, and it is not authority. It's need. It's your need. It's when you have a need to overcome an anxiety or a confusion, and to have the courage to stand up and say, I have a real need to understand this, to explore this more, because it affects me in such and such a way. Who else has energy for that? That has enormous seductive power to pull people together. It has the power to convene. And if you've never experimented with doing that, with this power, then you'll just have to take my word for it, that if you spark it, they will come. Although it's an aside that I'd love to talk about more. One of the challenges is, where do we come together that is going to support our convening? And if you'd like to experiment with that, again, one more invitation. I would be happy to share with you my notes from the past 7 years and many, many, many attempts at trying to bring people together across these silos to address questions of shared importance to all of us. I haven't published these notes yet, but I'm looking for people to play with them and help me improve them. If I ever do publish them, I'm thinking of calling it How to Basecamp. Because Basecamp we talk about metaphors, for me is the perfect metaphor for where humanity is right now. We are at the start of we don't know what. And it can be dark and scary on the frontier of the unknown, or you can make it just a little bit brighter with the light of your campfire. And so for me, that's the fourth reason, to trust that spirit of exploration inside you, to explore more, which is that we, the rest of us, need you to do that. I think we need you to turn your confusions, to turn your anxieties into journeys of discovery that will not begin unless you spark it. But once you spark it, are going to bring other people along in a journey that's going to help things become just a little bit more clearer for all of us. And that's how together you make this an age of discovery. So thank you very much for just the opportunity to tell that story. And now we've got time. I'd love to just have a conversation with you about your own experience from where you stand.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was awesome. While people pull their questions together, and I want to invite everyone from the other room in the building to come in here if they do have any questions, and I'll get them on camera with me here. But I kind of wanted to start out with kind of a broad question about libraries. So one of the things that you said is that, and I loved it, was Europe's blind spot. So we as libraries are, we fight every day to prove our relevance in society and to our communities. And I think our libraries do a great job, but you don't really know your blind spot until, you've sailed through it and proclaimed a continent that isn't, India to be India. So what are some of the ways that we can be agile and ready to kind of act on new information and kind of spot our blind spot as early as possible?
Well, that's the $1 billion question. How can we learn everything that we don't know? I think that there is a kind of obvious. So there's maybe I'll offer. So first, humility. I don't know, but two, let me offer two immediate reactions to the question. I think part of the answer has to be diversity, right? In fact, let me just briefly show a picture. You might have briefly noticed. I didn't talk about it, but this picture, which was my kind of cover slide. This is a Calder mobile by the modern artist Alexander Calder, and for me, it's kind of my totem. It's the image that for me best represents what I think that we need to do. So the two things about a Calder mobile are beautiful. There's these large things that hang in space and slowly, freely rotate. The first beautiful thing about these mobiles is that it looks different depending where you stand. And the second beautiful thing about these mobiles is the only way to see it all is together. And that's kind of become, I guess, just one of my core beliefs about how we navigate the time that we're living in. To your question of how do we discover our blind spots is fundamentally, we have to approach a lot of problems in a much more kind of horizontal way, in a way where we're both aware that I'm acting with assumptions, and I'm aware that I can't see them all. But if I can pull people together who share a purpose and they're willing to do the same, then together we can develop a better picture of the whole. And this kind of gets to, to the relevance of libraries in society today. As I kind of hinted, I've been working on sort of convening diversity not just for diversity's sake, but around complex challenges, right? Like the future of healthcare, for example, and getting people who have a stake in that question. And one of the challenges is getting people into a space where they are ready to begin better. That's why I like the metaphor of base camp. You know, so many of us, we're on our mountains, right? And I'm maybe one of the worst offenders. I know what I know, and I'll walk into situations and start to explain to people because I'm on my mountain. What we all need to get much better at is sort of beginning better. Can we all come down off our mountains to base camp where we have a kind of humility about what I know, and also that fundamentally I'm here to explore what maybe my assumptions are. And we can get more into this, but I think libraries could have a crucial role in society of being a starting point for inquiry, which as I look around all the other spaces in society, I don't know where is the space for that, if not in our libraries. I have a lot more of ideas on that, but I'll pause there.
I love the idea of the library as base camp and people coming down off their mountains to regroup and gather together. I think I've got a question here, so I'm going to get out of the way and let Justin come and ask you his question.
Hi,
Justin?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I noticed that you referenced ChatGPT a few times in there, and it seems like the most apparent benefit that we have now, obviously people are going to find new applications for it, is just cutting through all the depth of information that's out there on the internet, instead of spending hours and hours Google searching, and it kind of will curate the most applicable information for you and really save time that way. So in terms of your connecting with people who know what you don't know, for the idea of breaking down those silos and stuff, I just wonder what you would recommend for ways of kind of curating people to connect with, rather than just hoping that you coincidentally run into the one out of the 8 billion people in the world that might have something that you could benefit you and changing the world ideally.
Yeah, it's a great question, Justin, and so I'd love to follow up, and I'll send you my notes, because I've done a lot of thinking on that, and I do think part of it is how, so if we extend the base camp metaphor, I think it begins with making an invitation, and getting that invitation right, sort of giving it the right framing. Here's the issue that I want us to get together on, so it's relevant. There's a topic, there's a reason, but also sort of having some humility and the assumptions behind it and what we want to get out of it. I think there is there are some ingredients to getting the invitation right, and then I think there are kind of several lenses that we can use to help us figure out what is the mix that's missing on this topic. That's a phrase that I like to use a lot, the mix that is missing. And so, like, answering that question, how do you curate that group of people, I think is a combination of self-awareness around who do I need, what kind of voices do I need, what does this topic need. I think there's also something around who has energy for this. That's one of the things that I've learned a lot the past couple of years, is that when it comes to people going on journeys together, as important as the logic and the kind of the analytic analysis of who should be doing this together, as important of that is the energy. Who has energy for this? Do I have energy for this? Do I have a real lived tension that I want to resolve through a learning process with other people? And if people don't honestly feel that, then they're not good companions on that journey. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, and maybe the broadest conclusion that I've reached is that the meeting is the midpoint, and if it doesn't feel that way, then it's probably not enough work has gone into exactly the kind of question that you raised in terms of who should be there and why are we doing this and all of that. I think there's a lot of, in general, there's a lot more work to be done before we gather than we tend to do. Which, you know, again, kind of back to the theme of what role can libraries play. I think that's part of the reason why, you know, why we live in these silos is it is a lot of work to cross them. There is this sort of hump that people don't have the time and capability to overcome. But we need institutions that can help us to do that much more easily if we want to see more of that connecting happen.
I really like what you said about making an invitation, kind of lighting a signal fire that will draw forth the people who have the energy or maybe the shared need to come to the table and meet with you. And I think that you made another very valuable point when you say, and who has energy for this? Because, you know, especially I think living in small rural communities, there's only so many hats that a person can wear at any given time. But, you know, when you're known to be someone who will step up and do the work, people are constantly going to hand you hats to wear and work to do and to help with. So being cognizant of the fact that, you know, a person might have the spirit, but do they have the energy? Are they able to come to the table and do the work and participate in what needs to be done? I think that's another really good point. I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's anything I'm missing. I don't want to accidentally silence anybody. Okay. Does anybody else have a question that they want to come and ask our resident futurist for the day? Not the day, the hour. Okay. I'm going to give another moment of opportunity to the people who are tuning in remotely. They can either raise their hand in the meeting, or else they can also put a chat in the chat box, and I will happily ask their question for them. When you were talking about the me, you, they, others, and then the need for conveners, I thought that was really interesting. Libraries are such an obvious answer as like, who can be a convener and how can we draw people together? And I think that the role, you know, of a convener is to create a sense of us and that shared mission. And there's a way of looking at libraries that is me space, we space, and us space. And so those spaces, room to be alone when you're at the library, room to be alone with your thoughts, with your reading materials, room to be around other people, but not necessarily interacting, and then room to collaborate and room to connect. And a former mentor, that was kind of how she phrased it to me, that a good library can offer you a bit of everything. So this really resonates with that, the framework for me, you, they, others, and then there's us.
I've often had a thought that, you know, I remember one of the things that most impressed me about TED was that what they did is they defined a format, right? So public speaking, it existed, but they created a particular format. And if you wanted to speak on their stage, then you had to abide by that particular format. I think it would be a wonderful gift to the world if libraries had a particular format for that when we collaborate. So, you know, maybe not all of them, but when we do public conversations, there's a requirement that we set for it around, you know, openness to authoritative information or thing. I mean, I won't go into the details, and leave that for you. But as a user of libraries, I would love to show up for that and know that there are events in a format at the library which are very unlike, you know, the typical lectures and talks that I see at universities or, you know, all sorts of public events. But if I want to get into a conversation on an important topic where it's not somebody speaking from their mountain, but with humility, a rich mix of people are trying to begin better together on an important public question. That's my make-a-wish to my libraries. And there are some good libraries here in London, but I haven't seen any of them do that.
I really like that. It goes again back to the base camp idea of coming down off your mountain. Here's James with another question.
Hi, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, as a futurist, you're thinking about all these big new technologies, all these opportunities. I love this metaphor of exploring and learning as your strategy. How do we avoid, though, getting caught up in, I don't know, the excitement sometimes for the new technologies that we think are going to dramatically change the world, and then yet don't quite have that. So a good example would be the advent of ebooks and e-audio and all this digital streaming, etc. Libraries, we still at Northern Lights circulate 850,000 print books still. And I remember in 1995 them telling me we're going to take over the world and nobody's going to pick up another print book ever. And we only do 122,000 digital books. It's just we spent, and so libraries jumped on board that ebook revolution, and we diverted a bunch of our print material budgets into ebooks. And now we're finding ourselves in a weird divide where people still, that technology doesn't seem to be beatable in terms of the physical print book. So that's just an example, but are there strategies that we can employ when we're learning and exploring to help us avoid the pitfalls of sort of getting on the bandwagon with the next greatest thing, whether it be ChatGPT or whatever it might be? How do we find those things? Do you have thoughts about that?
I mean, you're asking all the right questions, I think. I suppose I've always been a bit skeptical of the next big thing because the world is so complex, right? I mean, that's one of the kind of the points of that model, and thinking about how wide the world is, that with so many factors go into a choice to how I consume my information, right? Like a physical book or an ebook. Are you really telling me that you've thought through all of those factors and have determined that this is going to be kind of the new dominant thing that everybody's going to do? I would go back to that person and say, like, I just don't think you're thinking, reality is more complicated than that. So I have a kind of learned skepticism about the next big thing. But I do think what the people on the hype wagons, and maybe that's also part of it. I have a skepticism about, why are you hyping this? Are you an investor in these technologies? Are you trying to get your capital back from me? But I do think the people who hype these things are useful because they do give me a good starting point for a question. Okay, so ChatGPT. Okay, I get that that's the hype, and I get that everyone's excited about it because now there's this sort of consumer-friendly use case that allows me to play with it. So, what is underlying this? And I think it's useful to go one layer deeper and learn what is going on at that deeper layer. So I'm not a computer scientist, but I understand math. And so when ChatGPT came out, rather than get hyped about that, I went onto YouTube and found MIT's 2023 course, Introduction to Deep Learning, and watched a series of 6 very good lectures, by the way. I highly recommend them. Introduction to Deep Learning, MIT, that just walked me through in a class that's for, kind of first years at MIT who are building these models. Where are we at with this technology? What do these algorithms do? How do they work? What are their limitations? And I just learned a lot, so that when a couple of weeks later, Geoffrey Hinton resigns from Google and starts talking about these things, I understood intuitively a bit more. Again, I'm not a computer scientist, but I understood a bit more. Okay, I get it, what you're on about. You're on about this, and that makes sense to me. So I feel like I understand it. I'm not too excited about ChatGPT, but the ability of natural language to be the computer interface to these knowledge bases, I think that's going to have a pretty big impact over the next several years, right? So that's, I guess, I'm sorry, I'm not giving short answers, but that's how I kind of take the hype and then I try to learn from it what's going on that's deeper. And I find that helps me to grow my
So you're
understanding.
telling us that the best strategy to not get blown away or get freaked out is to just learn more, do more exploring. That's what it feels like. And I think you're right. I think that's what we do as libraries, right? It's don't finish with that one book. Don't finish with that one idea. Keep going, right?
But if I could add onto that, yes, and learn together.
Yeah.
I think that's the big shift where, again, I feel like library, you have real opportunity to help people get that. I don't see this as it's about Chris Kutarna needs to just learn more. I think I've got to get better at pulling people into the opportunities to learn and creating more opportunities to almost like micro convening. If I can give like a specific corporate example. So I work with a client. I mean, aspects of this story are boring, but they're in-house legal counsel to a big corporation. So what these people do is they write like informative papers that they send around to management. They're a consumer goods company, so they have like branding work. So it's like a memo on generative AI. Here's what not to do. You know, don't use generative AI, ChatGPT generated stuff in a public relations memo without talking to those people, right? Very well-researched document that gave the new marching orders for how to use this new tool. And I looked at it and I said, but what is this inviting people to do? It's just pure information. If you as the legal department are giving this thing on generative AI, you should think about what's the invitation you can make with this. And it might be as simple as at the end, like, are you interested in this topic? Does this affect you? Do you have energy for this? Show up for, we're going to do a Zoom call on this. And for them just to understand as a legal department that I think, my bias, you're going to add more value if you stop thinking of yourselves as purely informative and start looking for what can we convene? What's the conversation we can begin? We've got an angle on this, but there's a lot else going on in the company that we don't know. This might be important and valuable to learn about. And it's just that shift, I think, that is subtle, and yet I think it's a game changer for how we approach these problems. And we just feel collectively like we're navigating it better.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
I call again for any other questions, but I did also roll back here with my own again. So I keep coming back to the base camp image and the idea that we're building a signal fire to draw others down from their mountains and invite them to join us. And I was wondering if you have any advice for building in a more practical sense a signal fire that will draw in the right people. Justin asked about finding one person in 8 million, but what are some of the practicalities for building a good signal fire so the people that you need to find you will find you?
So I have like 150 pages of notes on this that I'm going to send you.
So I'm getting the notes too. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. And then like, rather than me be the one, like the sage on stage with the answers, and then I would love to have a conversation about it around, I mean, this is my experience. These are things I've tried. This has worked for me, hasn't worked for me. You know, open data, right? If you find useful things that are useful, play with them. Let me know what works.
I like it.
I have so much energy for this, is what I'm saying.
Oh, good. A major thing that I talked about with some people who are not in this room but are in a different room today is advocacy and the role of libraries in spreading the word and building a bridge between people who might not initially know that they should be coming down to your signal fire. And so I think that, yeah, that's something that we all want to give some thought to, is like, how can we build the right message, and how can we connect with the right people? So yeah, do share your notes, because this is something that we're going to be, you know, returning to iteratively and hopefully getting better and better at over time.
You know, this is, I'll share it. I'm not sure if this is off topic or on topic, but another aspect of this is, I was at a music festival last year. The UK is famous for their music festivals, and one of them is called WOMAD. It's the World Music and Dance Festival. A lot of fun. And one of the features they had at the festival was a human library, where they had people that you could check out. You could check out a person, an interesting person, and have a conversation with them. And you know, I think that was an unsettling idea. Like, wow, what if that's what libraries were? I mean, why aren't there also people in the community that the library helps? And again, it's part about holding a space where people go, okay, that's the game that we're playing in this space. I can think of, for example, I would love to be able to go to a library and have a conversation with elders. You know, people that I don't have social connections with, but I know I have stuff to learn from them. But I live in this kind of stovepipe world where I don't know how to navigate that. How do I find the people and ask them that this is the game I want to play with you? You know, what's the institution in society that mediates that for me? I don't think that there is one. And who would I trust to go to? So again, I'm throwing out probably irrelevant ideas, but wouldn't that be? And I think that's kind of part of it. Like the people who have energy for your signal fire, Jesse, they're probably also the people who would have energy for the individual who comes up and says, I would just like to have a conversation with somebody who has, you know, military experience, or somebody who's been in politics, or somebody who's been, and on and on and on and on and on. Sorry, I'll stop rambling. I'm just very excited to have this chance to speak with all of you.
I really like that, and I've been a part of hosting human libraries before, and in every endeavor that we've engaged in, they've been so successful at bringing people down out of the woodwork to participate. And one of the things we talked about earlier was how it's not enough to just invite your leaders and invite your power players in a community to come and do a photo op at the library. It's much more meaningful if you can invite them all the way in to be a part of things. And the human library is a wicked way to do that. But not just the power players, like doing that for every walk of life in your community.
But your example, you know, one of the challenges in our society is that for people in leadership positions, it is hard to be human. It's very risky. You know, the reputational costs of being misunderstood and things like that. So that's another example of, you know, a kind of a failed connection that would be so important for so many conversations that you can imagine convening. How do you make that something? You know, Chatham House has their Chatham House rules. Okay, well, that's another example of a format, an innovative format to create a human space that serves an unmet need. What are the library rules? Well, I know some of them. I confess I've broken a few of them over the years.
We all do. And the rules, they have to change, because we want people in our libraries, and our libraries are, for the 8,000th time today, so much more than just books on the shelf and story times for other people's kids. Like there's so much more than that. And we have to make noise if we want people to know that. We have to be disruptive, and we have to be unexpected, and you know, they're never going to see us coming. We're so creative. So that's just a part of the walk that we choose to walk when we do this. So this is fantastic. I really like this. final call for any questions
I have
or
a question.
Okay.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for this. This has been really great.
Hi, you're welcome. Sorry, I don't know your name.
I'm Joanne.
Hi, Joanne.
So a few of us were talking and we're wondering how you organize that bookshelf behind you. And is that working for you?
I have organized it actually. Yeah. So these are my books. This is right here. This is my like my sacred shelf. These are my favorite books. So whenever I need, you know, what have I got here? I've got this is a copy of the Tao Te Ching that a friend of mine in China gave me. The Boys in the Boat. I'm a rowing coach, and so this is one of my rowing teams gave me. You know, here is sort of personal philosophy. Anyway, it's well organized, I promise.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. We're okay then.
But I mean, if you have a better method, I assume that as a library you do. I don't have barcodes on my books.
No, I would be the wrong person to ask about that. My books are shelved in order of vibe, which makes it really hard. So, yeah, vibe. So it's.
I mean, as long as you haven't organized them by the color of the spines, I feel like that's.
No, I actually read my books. Okay. Final call for questions, comments, queries, or gentle criticism of how Chris organizes his bookshelf. Any other takers?
There was nothing gentle about that. I felt it.
I just got called right out.
We were curious.
I am running out of bookshelf space, by the way. That's just a general challenge.
That is a
You
challenge
should
for
see my living room.
got time, want to take us on a tour? Just kidding. But other people's bookshelves are, I think, a subject of endless fascination for
Yeah.
people in the library world.
But that's an unfair game. I mean, I'm never going to be able to compare with your bookshelves.
So you would floored. Yeah, we're all avid collectors. Okay, well then, if I haven't got, and we're all clear in the chat, then if I haven't got anything else incoming, then I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us all the way from the UK today. It's been very, very lovely to have you and to hear about looking at the bigger picture and kind of changing our expectations about what we're going to see coming from the world. I really liked your super scribbly pictures from the beginning about how one shift in one end of or in one aspect of the spectrum will multiply and impact everywhere else. The easiest explanations for, well, chat GPT and like journalists thinking they're going to lose their jobs. The ripple effect, I think, is really, really interesting and something that we want to keep our eyes on, especially being in the information and technology sectors. So this is really awesome. And thank you everybody for sticking around and participating in this conversation with us. And again, yeah, this has been great. Lovely day.
And thank you all of you for the work that you do. I just have immense respect and appreciation for that. So thank you all very much. And it's been a privilege to just be able to spend a bit of time with you today. So thanks.
It's been great. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to sign up here. You all have a great day. Everybody online, in person, travel safe. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again,
Thanks,
Chris.
everyone. Bye.